Margaret passed away 3 weeks ago. Heart attack, the doctors said. She was 72 and lived alone in the same house where I spent most of my childhood summers. When she left me the house in her will, my sister Emma thought I was nuts for wanting to move back to Connecticut from my apartment in Brooklyn. Rachel, you have a good life in the city. Why would you want that old creaky house? She asked me over the phone while I was packing my things. But here's the thing. I've been freelancing as a graphic designer since the pandemic started, so I can work from anywhere. The rent in Brooklyn was killing me, and Margaret's house in Milford is paid off. It made financial sense, even if Emma couldn't see it that way. The house is one of those Victorian places built in the 1890s. Nothing fancy, but it has character. White clapboard siding that needs a fresh coat of paint, a wraparound porch with spindle railings, and inside there's this long hallway that runs from the front door straight to the kitchen in the back. Family photos line both walls of that hallway, 3 generations of Morgans staring down at you as you walk through. I moved in on a Tuesday. The moving truck came around 10 in the morning, and by 6 that evening I was sitting in Margaret's old recliner eating Chinese takeout from containers, surrounded by boxes I hadn't even started unpacking. The house felt different without her in it, quieter, but also somehow more echoey, if that makes sense. Margaret had this very distinctive laugh, high-pitched, kind of sharp, and it always seemed to last a few seconds longer than normal laughs do. As a kid, it used to give me goosebumps. Not because it was mean or anything. Margaret wasn't a mean person. But there was something about that laugh that always made me feel like she knew something I didn't. My mom used to say Margaret laughed like that because she found life amusing in ways the rest of us couldn't understand. That first night, I went to bed around 11. I'd set up my mattress in what used to be the guest room upstairs, right above the living room. The moving boxes were still scattered everywhere, and I was exhausted. I fell asleep pretty much as soon as my head hit the pillow. I woke up at 2:17 a.m. I know the exact time because I looked at my phone immediately. There was a sound coming from downstairs. From the hallway, specifically. It was laughter. Margaret's laughter. Now I know what you're thinking. I was grieving. I was in a new place. Old houses make weird noises. Trust me, I told myself all of those things as I lay there in the dark, listening. But I knew that laugh. I'd been hearing it my whole life. The sound lasted maybe 10 seconds, then stopped. I waited, holding my breath, but it didn't come back. After about 5 minutes, I convinced myself it had been the neighbor's TV, or maybe the wind doing something strange with the house's old woodwork. I went back to sleep. The next morning, I called my neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, to introduce myself. She's lived next door for 40 years and was good friends with Margaret. "Oh, Rachel dear," she said when she realized who I was. "Your aunt talked about you all the time. She was so proud of your design work." We chatted for a few minutes about Margaret, and then Mrs. Henderson mentioned something that made me pause. "You know, I've been hearing odd noises from your house at night, just in the past week or so since since she passed. Probably just the house settling differently without someone living in it." "What kind of noises?" I asked. "Oh, I don't know exactly. Sounds like, this might sound silly, but it almost sounds like someone laughing, but I'm sure it's just pipes or something." I didn't tell her what I'd heard the night before. That evening, I decided to tackle Margaret's bedroom. She'd left most of her personal things behind, and I needed to go through them before deciding what to keep and what to donate. Her dresser was covered with framed photos, mostly family pictures, but also some of her and her friends from the church auxiliary and her bridge club. I found her jewelry box on the nightstand. It was one of those old wooden ones with the little ballerina that spins when you open it. I remembered playing with it as a kid. When I lifted the lid, the ballerina started turning, and this tiny, tinkling version of Fur-Elise began playing. Sitting right on top of her earrings was a folded piece of paper. It was a note in Margaret's handwriting. "Rachel, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and you're probably cleaning out my things. Don't feel bad about getting rid of stuff. Keep what matters to you and let the rest go to people who need it. The house is yours now. Take care of it. Love, Aunt Margaret." That note hit me harder than I expected. I sat on her bed and cried for probably 10 minutes. Margaret had always been practical like that, thinking ahead, making things easier for other people. I worked until about 10:30 that night, sorting through her clothes and books. I was tired and emotionally drained, so I decided to call it a day. I'd made good progress anyway. 3 boxes for donation, 1 small box of things I wanted to keep, and the rest could wait. I was brushing my teeth in the upstairs bathroom when I heard it again. This time it was clearer. Definitely laughter, definitely coming from the hallway downstairs. The same high-pitched, distinctive laugh I'd grown up hearing. It started soft, then got a little louder, then faded away. The whole thing lasted maybe 15 seconds. I rinsed my mouth and stood there listening, but the house was quiet again. My heart was beating fast, but I wasn't exactly scared. It was more like confused and curious. I walked to the top of the stairs and looked down into the hallway. The streetlight outside cast long shadows through the front door's glass panels, making patterns on the hardwood floor. All of Margaret's photos were still hanging on the walls, watching the empty space like they always had. "Hello?" I called softly, feeling a little ridiculous. Obviously, no one answered. I went to bed, but I didn't sleep well. Every little sound the house made, and old houses make a lot of sounds, had me listening carefully, wondering if it was going to turn into that laugh again. The third night, it happened again at almost the same time. 2:20 a.m. according to my phone. This time I got up immediately and walked to the top of the stairs. The laughter was still going when I got there, and it seemed to be coming from right in the middle of the hallway, near Margaret's favorite family photo, the one of all of us at Christmas 2 years ago. I stood there for maybe 30 seconds after it stopped, just listening to the silence. Then I went back to bed. The next morning, I called Emma. She lives in Sacramento now with her husband and 2 kids, and we usually talk once a week anyway. "How's the house?" she asked after we'd covered the usual stuff about work and her kids' school activities. I hesitated for a second. "It's good. Lots to sort through, but I'm making progress. Any weird old house problems? Plumbing issues or anything?" This was my opening to tell her about the laughter, but something made me hold back. Instead, I said, "No major problems. It's just, you know how old houses are? They make noises. God, I remember that place being so creaky when we were kids. Remember how we used to pretend it was haunted?" "Yeah," I said. "We used to scare ourselves silly. Speaking of which, how are you doing emotionally? Being in Margaret's house and everything? It's got to be weird." "I'm okay. It's actually kind of comforting being around her things. Like she's still here in some way." Emma was quiet for a second. "You know, grief can do funny things to people, Rach. If you start feeling, I don't know, like you're seeing or hearing things that aren't there, that's pretty normal. It doesn't mean you're losing it." "I'm fine, Em, really." But after we hung up, I kept thinking about what she'd said. Was this just grief? Was my brain trying to hold on to Margaret by making me think I could still hear her laugh? That afternoon, I was in the kitchen unpacking dishes when my phone rang. It was Mrs. Henderson. "Rachel, dear, I hope you don't mind me calling. I wanted to ask you something and I wasn't sure if I should." "Of course, Mrs. Henderson. What is it?" "Well, it's about those sounds I mentioned. The laughter. I heard it again last night, around 2:30. And the thing is, well, it sounded just like Margaret. I know that sounds impossible, but that's what it sounded like to me." My stomach did a little flip. "Really? Now, I don't want you to think I'm some crazy old lady who believes in ghosts or anything like that. But I knew Margaret's laugh for 40 years. It was very distinctive, wasn't it?" "Yeah," I said quietly. "It was. I'm sure there's a logical explanation. Maybe it's a radio somewhere picking up old recordings. Or maybe I'm just remembering her laugh because I miss her. But I thought you should know, in case you've noticed anything unusual." After we hung up, I sat at Margaret's kitchen table, the same yellow Formica table where she'd served me countless bowls of cereal during my childhood visits, and tried to think rationally about what was happening. 2 people, in different houses, were hearing the same distinctive laugh at roughly the same time of night. The laugh of someone who had died 3 weeks ago. Either we were both experiencing some kind of shared delusion, or there was something I didn't understand going on in this house. That night, I decided to stay awake and wait. I wanted to be fully conscious and alert if it happened again. I made coffee and settled into the living room recliner with a book, positioned so I could see into the hallway. At 2:15 a.m., I heard the floorboards creak upstairs. Just once, like someone had stepped on the loose board outside the guest bathroom. Then, nothing. At 2:22 a.m., the laughter started. This time, I was wide awake and paying complete attention. It was definitely Margaret's laugh, no question about it. It seemed to be coming from the hallway, somewhere near the middle. The sound was clear enough that I could hear the specific rhythm of it, the way Margaret always laughed in these little ascending bursts, like musical notes going up a scale. I stood up slowly and walked to the entrance of the hallway. The laughter continued for maybe 10 more seconds, then stopped abruptly, like someone had suddenly covered their mouth. I stood there in the dark for a long time, maybe 5 minutes, just listening and looking down that long corridor lined with family photos. The streetlight outside made everything visible enough to see that the hallway was empty. No person, no movement, nothing that could be making that sound. But I had heard it. Mrs. Henderson had heard it. And it was Margaret's laugh, without any doubt. I went back to the recliner and sat there until sunrise, but it didn't happen again that night. The next day, I called the oil company to ask about the heating system. Maybe there was something wrong with the furnace that could cause strange sounds. The technician who came out was a guy named Mike, who'd been servicing Margaret's system for years. "Everything looks normal," he told me after checking the basement. "Your aunt took good care of this equipment. Why, were you hearing something unusual?" I described the laughter without mentioning that it sounded like Margaret. I just said there was a recurring sound at night that I couldn't identify. Mike scratched his head. "Well, heating systems can make all kinds of noises, especially when the weather starts getting cold like this. But what you're describing doesn't sound like anything mechanical to me. More like, well, like what you said, laughter." He left, and I was back to having no rational explanation. That evening, I was going through more of Margaret's things when I found her address book in the kitchen drawer. I flipped through it, looking at all the names and phone numbers written in her careful handwriting. Most were people I didn't recognize. Friends from church, her bridge club, neighbors from over the years. But then I found something interesting. On the inside back cover, Margaret had written some notes. They looked recent. The ink was still dark blue, not faded like some of the addresses. The note said, 2:15, 2:25 a.m., most nights. Always the same spot in hallway. Started after Emma's visit in August. Getting stronger? Emma had visited in August, about a month before Margaret died. She'd stayed for a weekend to help Margaret with some household repairs. I stared at those notes for a long time. Margaret had been hearing something too, and she'd been keeping track of it, just like I was now. I called Emma that night, even though it was late in California. "Did anything unusual happen when you visited Margaret in August?" I asked without even saying hello first. "Rachel, what do you mean unusual? And why are you calling so late? Did you notice anything weird about the house? Any strange sounds or anything like that?" Emma was quiet for a second. "Actually, yeah. One night I heard what sounded like someone laughing in the hallway. It woke me up. When I asked Margaret about it the next morning, she just said old houses make noise and changed the subject." "Why?" I told her everything then. About the laughter I'd been hearing. About Mrs. Henderson hearing it too. About Margaret's notes in the address book. Emma listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. "Rach," she finally said, "I think you need to come stay with us for a while. This doesn't sound healthy. I'm not making it up, Em. Margaret heard it too. She was keeping notes. I know you're not making it up, but that doesn't mean it's what you think it might be. There could be all kinds of explanations." "Like what?" She couldn't give me any that made sense. After we hung up, I went to bed around midnight. I'd been sleeping better the past few nights, mainly because I was so tired from unpacking and organizing. But that night I lay awake, thinking about Margaret's notes, and wondering what she meant by getting stronger. At 2:18 a.m. I found out. The laughter started the same way it always did, from somewhere in the middle of the hallway. But this time, after about 10 seconds, it moved. I could hear it traveling down the hall toward the kitchen, then back toward the front door, then back to the center, like someone was walking back and forth while laughing. And this time it lasted almost a full minute. I got out of bed and crept to the top of the stairs. I could still hear it clearly, Margaret's distinctive laugh moving up and down the hallway below me. When I looked down, the hallway appeared empty, just like always. But the sound was definitely moving from one end to the other. Then, just as abruptly as it had started, it stopped. I stood there for several minutes, but everything stayed quiet. Finally, I went back to bed, but I didn't sleep at all the rest of that night. The next morning, I made a decision. I was going to document everything. If this was grief-induced hallucination, fine. At least I'd have a record to show a therapist. If it was something else, well, I'd have a record of that too. I started a simple notebook. Date, time, duration, location, any unusual details. Just like Margaret had been doing, apparently. And that's where I am now, 3 days later. I've heard Margaret's laughter 6 more times. Always between 2:15 and 2:30 a.m., always in the hallway, and always lasting a little longer each time. Mrs. Henderson hasn't mentioned hearing it again, but yesterday she did ask me if I was settling in okay, and if the house was treating me well. There was something in the way she asked that made me think she's still hearing things too, but doesn't want to worry me. I don't know what's happening in this house. Part of me wants to call it grief, call it stress, call it old house noises that my brain is interpreting as something familiar. That would be the rational thing to think. But I keep coming back to Margaret's notes. She heard something too, before she died, and she thought it was getting stronger. Last night, the laughter lasted almost 2 minutes. And for just a second, right at the end, I could have sworn I heard my name mixed in with it. But that might have been my imagination. I honestly don't know anymore. It's been a week since I started keeping the notebook, and things have gotten worse. Or different. I'm not sure which. The laughter happens every night now, always around the same time. I've gotten used to waking up just before 2:15 a.m., like my body knows it's coming. Last Tuesday, I decided to set up my laptop in the hallway and try to record it. I sat there from 2:01 to 3:00 a.m. with the recording software running, but when I played it back the next morning, there was nothing. Just silence and the occasional sound of me shifting in my chair. That bothered me more than I expected. Either the microphone wasn't picking up something that was really there, or I was hearing things that didn't exist. Neither option made me feel good. Work has been suffering. I missed a deadline for the first time in 3 years because I keep falling asleep at my computer during the day. My client, this marketing firm in Boston, was understanding when I explained I was dealing with family stuff, but I can't keep using that excuse forever. Emma calls me every other day now. She's worried, and she's not subtle about it. Yesterday, she suggested I see someone, just to talk through the stress of losing Margaret and moving to a new place. She didn't say the word therapist, but that's what she meant. I'm fine, I told her, which is what I always say. But I'm not fine. I'm exhausted and confused and starting to question everything I thought I knew about reality. The breakthrough happened 3 nights ago. I woke up at 2:14 a.m., 1 minute before the usual time. I could feel it coming, like pressure in the air before a thunderstorm. I got out of bed and walked to the top of the stairs, which had become my routine. I wanted to see if there was any pattern I was missing, any detail that might explain what was happening. The laughter started right on schedule, coming from the center of the hallway, but this time felt different. Louder, somehow. More present. Instead of sounding like it was coming from somewhere in the distance, it sounded like Margaret was standing right there in the hallway. I gripped the banister and listened. The laugh went on for about 30 seconds, the same ascending musical pattern I remembered from childhood. Then it stopped, like always. But this time, I was so frustrated and tired and confused that I did something I'd never done before. "Margaret?" I called down into the hallway. "Is that you?" The silence that followed was different from the usual silence. It felt expectant, like the whole house was holding its breath. Then, clear as anything, I heard my name, Rachel. "Ah!" It was Margaret's voice. Not shouted, not whispered, just spoken in a normal tone, like she was having a conversation with me, like she was standing right there in the hallway, looking up at me. I stood frozen at the top of those stairs for probably 5 minutes, waiting for something else to happen. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears, but there was nothing more, just my name, hanging in the air of that empty hallway. I went back to bed, but I didn't sleep. I lay there until sunrise, replaying those few seconds over and over. Had I really heard my name, or had my exhausted brain just filled in the silence with what I wanted to hear? The next morning I called Mrs. Henderson. Did you hear anything unusual last night? I asked her. Well, yes, actually. Around 2:30. It sounded like someone talking, but I couldn't make out words. Did you hear it too? So I hadn't imagined it. Mrs. Henderson had heard something at the same time, even if she couldn't make out what it was. I spent that day researching online. I looked up grief hallucinations, audio pareidolia, old house acoustics, anything that might explain what was happening. I found a lot of information about how grief can cause people to hear voices of deceased loved ones, especially in the first few months after a death. It's actually pretty common, but none of the articles explained why a neighbor would hear the same things at the same time. The second time Margaret spoke to me was 2 nights later. I was ready for it this time. I'd positioned myself at the top of the stairs before 2:15 a.m. and waited. The laughter came right on schedule, lasting about 40 seconds. When it stopped, I didn't wait. Margaret, I know that's you, I said into the darkness. What do you want? The silence stretched out for maybe 30 seconds. Then her voice came back, clearer than before. Find it, Rachel. 2 words, spoken in that matter-of-fact tone Margaret had always used when she was telling me to do something, like when she'd send me to look for her reading glasses or ask me to get something from the basement. Find what? I called back, but there was no answer. Just the usual silence of the old house settling into itself. I went downstairs this time, turning on lights as I went. I walked the length of the hallway slowly, looking at everything. The family photos, the small table where Margaret kept her mail, the coat closet, the doorways leading to the living room and kitchen. Everything looked exactly like it always had. I stood in the spot where the laughter seemed to come from and looked around. Nothing seemed different or out of place. If Margaret wanted me to find something, she was going to have to be more specific. The next day, I started searching the house systematically. I'd already gone through most of Margaret's personal belongings, but now I was looking for something else. Something hidden, maybe. Something Margaret thought was important enough to contact me from wherever she was. I started with her bedroom, checking drawers I'd already emptied, looking behind furniture, feeling along the edges of picture frames. Nothing. I moved to the kitchen, going through every cabinet and drawer. I found old warranties for appliances, rubber bands, expired coupons, the usual kitchen junk, but nothing that seemed significant. The living room was next. I moved the furniture and checked behind cushions and under tables. I even looked inside the old piano that hadn't been played in years. Still, nothing. That night I tried talking to Margaret again. I'm looking, I told the empty hallway, but I need more help. What am I supposed to find? The laughter came, lasting almost a full minute this time, but when it stopped, there was no voice, just silence. Last night was different again. I woke up at 2:13 a.m. and went to my usual spot at the top of the stairs. But before the laughter even started, I heard Margaret's voice. The basement, she said, as clearly as if she was standing next to me. Look in the basement, Rachel. I'd been avoiding the basement. It was one of those old stone foundation cellars, dimly lit by a single bare bulb, full of decades of stored junk. Margaret had used it mainly for her Christmas decorations and old furniture she couldn't bear to throw away. But if that's where Margaret wanted me to look, that's where I'd look. This morning, I went downstairs with a flashlight and started searching. Most of the basement is exactly what you'd expect. Boxes of holiday decorations, old furniture covered with sheets, Margaret's ancient washer and dryer. But in the far corner, behind a stack of boxes I had to move, I found something interesting. There's a section of the stone wall that looks different from the rest. Newer somehow. The mortar is a slightly different color, and the stones don't quite line up with the pattern of the rest of the foundation. I'm going to go back down there tonight with better tools. Whatever Margaret wants me to find, I think it's behind that wall. I just hope I'm ready for what I'm going to discover. I went back to the basement that night with a hammer and chisel from Margaret's toolbox. The mortar around those newer stones was softer than I expected, crumbling away pretty easily. After about 20 minutes, I had loosened one stone enough to pull it out. Behind it was a metal box, like the kind people use for important documents. Inside were papers, newspaper clippings, and a cassette tape with insurance written on it in Margaret's handwriting. I took everything upstairs and spread it out on the kitchen table. The first thing I found was newspaper clippings from 1987 about a missing girl named Jennifer Blackwood. She was 17 when she disappeared from this house. The Blackwoods had owned it before Margaret bought it in 1988. According to the articles, Jennifer vanished on a Friday night in October 1987. She told her parents she was going to study at a friend's house but never arrived. Her car was found at the old Milford Mall, but no trace of Jennifer was ever found. The case went cold, and the family moved away. But why would Margaret have kept all this hidden in the basement? And what was on that cassette tape? I found an old boombox in Margaret's bedroom closet and played the tape. What I heard changed everything. It was Margaret's voice, but younger. This is Margaret Morgan, November 15th, 1987. I'm making this recording because I saw what happened to Jennifer Blackwood and I'm scared. My stomach dropped. Margaret had witnessed something. I was taking my evening walk around 9:30. I saw Jennifer's car in the driveway, but also another car, a dark blue sedan. I saw two men grab Jennifer as she walked from her car to the front door. They forced her into the sedan and drove away. Margaret paused, taking a shaky breath. I was going to call 911, but then I realized one of the men looked familiar. I think it was Detective Morrison from the Milford Police. If it really was Morrison, then going to police might not help Jennifer and might put me in danger too. Detective Morrison, a police officer involved in Jennifer's disappearance. The tape continued. I've been watching the house for 3 weeks. I've seen Morrison's car there twice more. I took pictures. I found the photos at the bottom of the box. Blurry black and white shots showing a man in police uniform coming and going from the Blackwood house, loading boxes into his car. Margaret's final words on the tape. I think they killed Jennifer and are using her house to store something illegal. Morrison has keys to the place. I think he made the whole family disappear. I'm hiding this evidence where someone trustworthy will eventually find it. Someone trustworthy. She'd meant for me to find this. The next night, Margaret spoke to me again at 2:15 a.m., clearer than ever before. They killed me, Rachel. I felt like the floor dropped out from under me. What do you mean? It wasn't a heart attack. Morrison is retired but still alive. He found out I still had the evidence. They came to the house 2 days before I died. Morrison and another man. They wanted the evidence. I told them I'd destroyed it years ago, but they didn't believe me. They put something in my coffee, made it look like a heart attack. I slid down the wall and sat on the hallway floor. Margaret had been murdered. Jennifer's case has been reopened, Margaret continued. Someone came forward with new information about Morrison. He's being investigated now. That's why they decided I was too dangerous to leave alive. What do you want me to do? Take the evidence to the FBI. Don't trust the local police. Some of them might still be involved. The federal agents investigating Morrison are clean. Over the next 2 nights, Margaret gave me specific instructions. Names, dates, locations. She even told me about a safety deposit box at First National Bank with more documents. I contacted the FBI field office in New Haven. Special Agent Rodriguez met me at a coffee shop, and I gave her copies of everything. Documents, photos, cassette tape. I also told her about Margaret's death and her belief she'd been murdered. Agent Rodriguez listened without interrupting. Ms. Morgan, this evidence could be very significant to our case. We've been investigating Detective Morrison for months, but we've had trouble finding solid proof from the 1980s. These documents could be exactly what we need. What about my aunt's death? We'll definitely investigate. If she was murdered for what she knew, that's a federal crime. We can have her body exhumed and tested for substances not detected in the original autopsy. That was 3 days ago. Yesterday, Agent Rodriguez called to tell me they'd executed search warrants on Morrison's house and found evidence linking him to Jennifer's disappearance and several other crimes from the 1980s. Morrison was arrested this morning. Last night was the first night I didn't hear Margaret's laughter. Instead, at 2:15 a.m., I heard something different. Thank you, Rachel. Her voice was softer, peaceful. I can rest now. I love you, Margaret, I said to the empty hallway. I love you too, sweetheart. Take care of the house. It's happy now. I haven't heard anything since. No laughter, no voices, no unusual sounds. The house feels lighter, like a weight has been lifted from it. Mrs. Henderson stopped by this afternoon with homemade soup. The house seems quieter lately, she said. More peaceful. I think Margaret would be happy. Agent Rodriguez says Morrison and his associates will likely face charges for multiple murders, including Jennifer's and probably Margaret's. The evidence Margaret kept for 36 years is going to bring justice for crimes people thought would never be solved. I'm staying in the house. Emma thinks I'm crazy, but this feels right. Margaret left this place to me for a reason. She needed someone she trusted to find the truth and make sure justice was served. The house is quiet now, but it's a good quiet. Sometimes, late at night, I smell Margaret's perfume in the hallway. Not scary, just comforting. Like she's letting me know she's still watching over the place. Some mysteries get solved. Some ghosts get to rest. And some houses just need the right person living in them to be happy again.